1982. It was yet another hot and sunny day down in the beautiful city of Croydon, where it used to be lovely hot days and there was beautiful open times and it was a beautiful city. One day we were heading over to the bar with me and Chris to go and get ourselves a good old whiskey. And I remember one time we were going over to the bar, and all of a sudden we bumped into someone. And we realized it was Kevin. I said, "Oh, howdy, partner. What's good? How you doing?" I said, and the gal said, "Oh, doing fine. I'm just heading over back to my house, so I have to go over and go sign some papers." I said, "What papers?" I said, "Well, it's got to do with the rentals. I've got payments to do. And also go farm payments, you know." And I said, "Oh, well, I hope that goes well with you. But, where did you come from?" I said, "Oh, I just came from the bar, went to drink something, and I was going to go back to the house, go do a favor for stuff. So I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm just not wasting any time. I'll see you then." I said, "See you then, partner." So we continued on. We arrived in the bar. And one time we went to the bar. So we stood there, asked for a quarter pint of whiskey, or a quarter pint of Jack Daniels. And I remember one time, and now without them knowing, Gwengo was sitting there behind. And Gwengo was sitting there behind, just 7 people ahead of him, looking at them, the ones who he wanted to, and who he literally put bonfires on their phones. Till the very next day, he saw something, and he snuck towards them. He had a .22 rifle in his hand, and he was about to really shoot him. But then he didn't do it. Instead, he wanted to fight him. All of a sudden, he realizes, and when he turns around, it was Gwengo, the bonfires himself. And all of a sudden, a complete chaos happened beside the bar. And in the bar, it was one that we would never forget. Chris never saw something like this. I was just trying to hear. And then literally, Chris ran. He found a telephone, and he called him, and he said, Warner, come over here to the bar now. If you're close here, there's a fight between Gwengo and IFAU. Quick. I said, and then he realized he was calling out the police, and I said, "Okay, we're on our way with the sheriffs." And I said, "Okay." And then the sheriffs plus the leadership, so I Finland, headed towards the bar as quick as they can, saying that they already found him. And then until the very next day, they realized that at that time when they were about to get in, he was arraigned that IFAU already shot him. And it was successful that he was shot down. And until the very next day that they praised that the man who took the person out and the man who shot him dead in the bonfire that has made bonfires is officially down. And it was a victory, and both Chris and me were successful, and we finally were done. So the very next day, we were sitting down there at the porch, me and Chris, watching the beautiful view from afar, and I said to him, "What a relief, Chris. We finally got Gwengo down, and we got the bonfires completely over." And then, the next morning, I saw someone called me, and the reader was late. I said, "Partner, I have bad news." I said, "What now?" And he said, "A second Gwengo has appeared." And I was like, "What? I thought we killed the other Gwengo." "That what you saw wasn't the real Gwengo," Knight said. He said, "That what you saw there was completely different towards what you saw there at the bar." And so, and then I was like, "Oh, just great. How long is this even going to happen?" He said, "Well, just gotta do it. I'll tell you where the real Gwengo is. The real Gwengo sits all the way in Sherman. He sits all the way in Sherman. No, sir, not Sherman. It's not Sherman, my bad. In Croydon. In Croydon. He is 5 miles south of Croydon. And he lives there. And he's got a whole gang full of his rivers who sets up on fires. Now, in order for us to get them down, we will have to guard our entrances in the night. So, are you ready for this job? I will get everyone together and we will get all this locked room done with. I said, good idea, partner. We will do that. Should I get their gang well up ready? I said, yes, we will do that. And then I said, okay, wonderful. Then I'll see you down there at Croydon. I said, all right, see. So come the very next day, he was going over to Lane, speaking to Lane, and then afterwards we saw, I said, hello there, Lane. And he said, hey there, United. So, are you ready for this job? I said, yes. Also, before we go, come over with me. I want to follow you to somewhere. I said, okay. And he took me down this basement where he had all of his rifle collections. And we said, ooh, dang, Lane, you got a lot of rifles. I said, yes. I'm going to give one of these to you. I'm going to give you the best one possible. We have got this one of my special ones that my dad gave me way back in the 90s. And no, actually, way back in the 70s. And so I said, ooh, it's very good hit. I said, yes, very good hit. It can shoot targets from far away. I used to shoot deer with this. I said, ooh, nice. Okay, well, we should get going then. So they went. And then I got Chris also the same gun. I said, Chris, this is the gun that we will be using in order to find them and try to shoot them. I said, okay. Came the next day, Rick was going on to the bar. And then afterwards, when he arrived at the bar, he said, give me a quarter loaf of love, please. And he said, all right. And then they got the quarter loaf of love. You drink it. And he didn't realize that Bubblegum's was drinking some whiskey. Then he went over to Rick, and he said, well, do you remember me? And then Rick goes up, oh, Bubblegum's, hello there, howdy, what are you doing here? I said, I know, I just came to chill by the bar. By the way, did you hear that Lane and IFAU have just planned something amazing? I said, what? He said, they're going to sneak out in the night and try to get them out and get them down. We have to get them because now second Gwengo has just appeared. But the real Gwengo sits by Croydon, 5 miles from Croydon. And so they went. And then back forwarding to Lane and IFAU. They were going on and they arrived where the enemy camp is of Gwengo's aviation. And all of a sudden, realizing something in the way, they were trying to find a way to get them down. And all of a sudden, Chris was trying to get into position until then a riot broke out. And then they had to both run, and they both ran for their lives. And then, they had to find another way that they were considered unsuccessful. And then they had to find another way possible.